Jules by Belinda Rochelle, illustrated by Cornelius Van Wright and Yin Hua Hu. My favorite time is summer. Every summer my mom and dad take me to stay with Ma dear and Pop Henry. To get to the house, Dad drives for hours, chasing the disappearing day. The buildings of the city give way to open fields and tall trees that bend and sway as if to say hello. Their dog, Bandit, and Buddy greet us first. They run alongside the car, and when we get out, they smother us with wet, sloppy kisses. When Ma dear sees us, her eyes begin to fill with tears. "Aren't you glad we're here?" I ask. "Oh, child, these are tears of joy," she says, and hugs me close. Ma dear and Pop Henry are my great-grandparents. They are my best friends, too. Pop Henry is my mother's grandfather, and Ma dear is my mother's grandmother. Mom calls her grandmother dear, but I call her Ma dear for short. Her real name is Leah May. It's my name, too. At Pop Henry's and Ma dear's house, neighbors gather every evening to listen to Ma dear's stories. Mr. Brown, who owns a small grocery store, is there. He has a big round belly and a loud, friendly laugh that makes everyone around him laugh too. Mrs. Wallace, the retired schoolteacher, who wears her eyeglasses at the very tip of her nose, soon joins us. We all settle on the front porch, drinking glass after glass of cold lemonade that looks like sunshine. We shell peas as we wait for Ma dear to tell her stories. It's nightfall before she begins. "You don't live so long and not have a story or two to tell," she says. She rises out of her rocking chair. "That's what led them to freedom," Ma dear says as she points to the brightest star in the sky. "It was a sorrowful time because all people were not free. My great-grandfather James and his family escaped from slavery and headed north. They were tired and hungry from walking for almost 7 days. Their shoes were old and worn, their clothes not warm enough to protect them from the cold. James and his family were lost and frightened. They could hear the search dogs barking, could hear them running through the woods. Right behind them was slavery and maybe even death. James huddled his family close as the dogs got nearer. All of a sudden she appeared, a small woman dressed in men's clothes. "That star will lead you to freedom," the woman whispered, as she led them through the night, the star their only light. They walked until they came to a house where they would be safe. It was a hiding place on the Underground Railroad, the beginning of freedom. When they turned around to thank the woman, she was gone. But James knew who it was, even though she never uttered her name. "Who was it, Ma dear?" I ask. Ma dear looks at me and smiles. "Child, it was Harrietta Tubman." I gaze at the sky, and the star sparkles brightly like a beacon. Ma dear's best stories are the true stories. Her story, my family story. "You know, Pop Henry built our first house by himself," she says when the neighbors have gone home and she is tucking me into bed. "Back then, we didn't have televisions. We didn't even have electricity. Our only light was from oil lamps, candles, and the sun. Our only heat was from the old wood stove. I gave birth to all my children in that house, Leah May." Let me tell you the story of a very special night. My belly was full and rounded with second child. Pop Henry had gone to the midwife, and I was all alone. I was so afraid I was going to lose the baby. My first child, Jericho, had died because the hospital nearby didn't take colored people then, and I rocked that child into the arms of death. I rubbed my belly and told this little one to wait, to hold out until Pop Henry could get back with a midwife. We waited for hours, and finally Pop Henry and his midwife arrived. That's how your grandmother got her name, Patience. During light rain showers, Ma dear and I walked outside without our shoes. The grass tickles our feet. We slip and slide and let the mud squish between our toes. We catch raindrops with the tip of our tongues. At night, we punch holes in the lids of mason jars and catch lightning bugs that flicker on and off like green night lights. We listen to crickets and bullfrogs and laugh as Bandit and Buddy bark at the moon. On other days, Ma dear just sits in a large, comfortable easy chair next to the open window. She daydreams like I do when I'm at home and I feel all alone. But then Ma dear takes a photograph album from the special chest she keeps locked. "This here is your grandfather," she says. "Your great-great-grandfather, 6 generations back. His name was Harold Jefferson. He was a member of the Buffalo Soldiers, brave colored men who fought in the Civil War. After the war, the Buffalo Soldiers went out west and scouted the land. They built new roads and protected the mail coaches and settlers." She points to another very special photograph. It is a picture of Ma dear perched on top of a piano. She is smiling at the 2 men who stand next to her, holding her hands. "This is the Count and the Duke, the royalty of jazz," she says. Ma dear always loved music. Sometimes Ma dear plays records by Bessie Smith, Count Basie, and Duke Ellington. Ma dear taught my mother the words, and my mother taught me. Ma dear lets me wear a flapper dress, high heel shoes, and necklaces of bright beads that swing from my neck. "Come on, Miss Leah. I want to tell you the story of the night I met the Count and the Duke. It was my first visit to New York City," Ma dear says. "Let me introduce you to the Count. Count Basie, that is. Count, this is my great-granddaughter, Miss Leah. And let me introduce you to the Duke, Duke Ellington. Meet my great-granddaughter, Miss Leah." I bow my head and curtsy. Ma dear moves her head from side to side. Tapping our feet, we hum and sing. Then she guides my hands and we dance. Pop Henry joins us. He pulls Ma dear into his arms and they dance cheek to cheek, whirling around the room. Pop Henry leans his head back and laughs. So do I. Sundays are very special days. Ma dear puts on fancy clothes and an elegant hat. Pop Henry wears a suit and I wear my best pink dress with a bow in the back. As we walk to Shiloh's Baptist Church, Pop Henry and I tug at our collars. Ma dear points her fingers and shakes her head to scold us. On Sunday, you don't need a watch to tell the time. Church bells ring every hour. People gather from all around wearing their Sunday best. The choir sings, and we all clap hands as Ma dear taps the tambourine. Every morning, Pop Henry and I take long walks. We walk past Fisherman's Pond and throw pebbles that plop and skip across the water. We visit Mr. Brown's store to buy hard rock candy and caramel-colored apples. On the way home, we sit and rest under Brother Matthew, a large oak tree so old and so tall that Pop Henry gave it a name. I climb into the swing that hangs from Brother Matthew, and Pop Henry pushes me until I can almost touch the clear, bright blue sky. Pop Henry brings Ma dear's peppermints from Mr. Brown's store and wild sunflowers that he has picked from the yard. Time has whitened his hair. I love to plant kisses on his cheek and rub his curly white whiskers. The smell of his skin is sweet like chocolate. A smile tugs at his lips as if he knows something you don't. His voice is soft. He always talks about the Jordan River, of crossing over the land of milk and honey. "You know, Leah, I've fought in wars. I worked picking tobacco in the fields right here in North Carolina. I've seen so many bad things. Seen men beaten with whips. Seen burning crosses in the yards of decent people, all because they are colored. But the secret of life is not to be bitter. I have life still," he says. My great-grandpa loves little things, things that he can hold in his hands. During the day, he sits in the front steps and whittles small scraps of wood. Almost like magic, the scrapes become tiny elephants, lions, bears, and even little people. The days pass quickly, and my summer vacation will soon be over. Ma dear and I sit on the porch and watch the sunset. "You know, Leah, you and I are Africa's daughters," she points to the sun. "My father told me once that Africa's daughters are the children of the sun, and the sun has touched us. Our darkness is proof of its blessing." I lay my head in her lap, and she twists my hair into long braids, then wraps the braids into a crown on the top of my head. Soon I will return home, but this feels like home too. One day I'm going to write down all the stories. I'm going to be able to tell the stories just like you, I whisper. I promise to save every one of them so I can remember and so my children can remember. Ma dear smiles. With every tongue, with each telling, the stories are saved. As proof, she opens my mouth, and word for word I remember. Like diamonds, sapphires, and rubies, the stories are like jewels to treasure forever. The end.